Hello, Tennessee Voices viewers and listeners. This is David Plazas, the Opinion and Engagement Director for the USA Today Network Tennessee and the Tennessean. Today, I have the pleasure of having as my guest Harry Allen. He is the co-founder and Chief Relationship Officer for Studio Bank in Nashville, and he's also a member of the Community Depository Institutions Advisory Council for the Federal Reserve in Atlanta. Harry, how are you doing today?
I'm fantastic, David. Thank you for having me.
No, so good to have you here. And in part, I was very much interested in talking to you about your business background, but you are also incredibly involved in the community. But tell us a little bit about yourself and founding a bank. That's a huge deal. What's that like?
Yeah, and it was unexpected. I didn't grow up thinking that number one, I'd ever be a banker, and then two, being part of founding a bank. But I grew up here in Nashville. I'm a fifth generation Nashvilleian at least, and started in banking as an intern when I was 18 years old. And if, for the most part, been in banking ever since. I think that there are very few roles in our community where your work on a daily basis is quite evident and tangible. So I love partnering with organizations and business owners and kind of providing them resources to make whatever they've dreamed up in their heads a reality. And so it's kept me engaged. And when I had the opportunity to found or help bring about the next Nashville bank, it was an opportunity I absolutely couldn't pass up for the impact that it could have on the city that I grew up in.
It's interesting when people think about Nashville, they often think about music or they might think about food, but finance and banking are a huge part of the DNA of the economy here in Nashville.
For sure. And, this city has a long legacy of having strong financial institutions that are locally headquartered. And a lot of that economic activity we talk about, healthcare, music, arts and entertainment, technology, the rails that all of that economic activity runs on is from the financial services side. Deploying capital to folks who are starting and growing businesses is a meaningful part, as well as partnering with citizens who are financing homes and planning for a better way of life. So it's a work that's honorable.
When I started this podcast in 2020, there was so much uncertainty about COVID and its impact on the economy, and the economy has certainly turned around for the positive. But this year, there's also a lot of worry because of inflation, because of other factors of whether people should be preparing for a recession by the end of next year. What's your outlook in terms of what people should be thinking about, and how you're thinking about the economy now and into the future?
Yeah, I think that uncertainty is the absolute perfect word to describe kind of the outlook. None of us, or very few of us, have lived through a period of inflation that has come about so fast, so quickly, as what we've seen post-COVID. And so, I think the last time we had rates of inflation like this were the early 80s. And I don't know about you, but I was not working in the early 80s. And so it's new and different. For me, what I think about most are the fundamentals and basic principles. Cycles come, economic cycles come. And so, how are we planning with diligence and I think a relationship with a bank and bankers, or just folks in your life to help you figure out, the principles of savings and basic financial literacy. What's unfortunate is when inflation comes, especially as we've seen in this cycle, those who were struggling before, it's just that much harder. The increase in gas prices for some can really make getting to work on a daily basis an expensive proposition, especially without ample mass transit and other opportunities. And so, when that basket of goods at the grocery store increases overnight, that impacts some of our neighbors pretty drastically. And so, I think that our role as bankers and those folks who are in the financial services industry, partnering with communities throughout cycles is important. And this is the reason why, teaching financial literacy and helping folks understand how to save for the unknown and uncertain times is critical.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Certainly I don't remember those early 80s inflationary days in that way, but I do remember covering the Great Recession when a lot of community banks closed down. They shut down because of the way the economy went. It was a very scary time. There were those massive bailouts, whether it was for the auto industry or others, and people didn't know back then what was going to happen. I know one of the things that we talk about a lot in Nashville is affordability of housing, and how a lot of that lack of supply dates back to that time of the Great Recession because of capital issues that you talk about. And what are some of the conversations that you have in those areas, such as housing and such as livability in a place like Nashville, which is booming?
Yeah. So, the conversations I'm involved with are really about stock and inventory. The city came out with the affordability task force report, I believe in 2021, that mentions the tens of thousands of affordable units that this city is short. What's interesting in this cycle is that the rate of inflation and home valuations have increased faster than wage growth, right? And so affordability was an issue before even interest rates started to increase in our local economy. It's tough because I don't know that there are lots of incentives or enough incentives for developers to develop housing stock that's affordable. I think that a lot of our community organizations are focused on it, but when you're talking about 30,000 plus units that are needed, that's pretty daunting. And so we have seen folks move outside of the urban core to find affordable housing. And that impacts lots of things. When teachers can't live in Davidson County where they're teaching and move outside of the county and commute for a while, well, a few of them will do that until they find a house a job in their community. And so we've lost teachers, we've lost students and community members in the urban core who have been displaced through gentrification and other things. And so it's tough. I don't know what the solution is other than a focus on the inventory piece. And I know that there are initiatives and partners that are coming together to help with this. Amazon made an announcement during COVID with an investment in affordable housing. The Housing Fund and Marshall Crawford is definitely focused on this issue as well. And it's going to take a pretty significant collaborative effort to address. But when the neighborhood that I grew up in, the median home price is now over $500,000, it's just not, home ownership is becoming harder and harder to attain in our community.
Thank you for sharing that. We've come to the midpoint of the conversation where I like to ask guests what they've been doing during the time of COVID to help cope. Oftentimes leaders don't take care of themselves as well as they should because they're taking care of other people. So what are you reading, doing, watching just to stay healthy and well?
Oh gosh. Yeah. So I've got 3 kids, 10, 9, and 6. And COVID was hard for a lot of parents of young children. But for me, I look for the gifts in the hard times as well. And so when I was working from home and they were schooling from home, it was sort of a gift to be with them and to see what they're learning virtually during the school year as well. And, at the end of the day, as soon as I was done with all my Zoom calls, going outside and enjoying time with the kids. I think because of their ages during the start of COVID, they kept me present. They weren't as focused on the headlines and the developments, and they just wanted to know, what are we watching on TV this afternoon, and what board game are we playing? And so that helped me kind of disconnect from a lot of the stress. I've certainly binge watched, some things on Netflix. I could not stop watching Tiger King, and I knew it was like, not the most productive,
You're not the
thought-provoking.
first to admit it on this show.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, and then I read a book that was really impactful called Essentialism. And it's about, getting to the heart of the matter, and saying yes to the things that you should be saying yes to, and kind of shedding all of the superfluous things that can come your way, especially leaders who have a heart for service. I think I needed some of the lessons that the book Essentialism gave.
Well, thanks so much for sharing that. And you are very involved in the community. Apart from being a father, a banker, an executive at a bank, you are also involved in everything from Rotary Club to many other things that I think are important, because I know that people talk a lot about the Nashville way, about giving back and that hospitality. And how do you approach that aspect of trying to balance that, Southern hospitality and also the demands of new residents who are, if they haven't already outnumbered natives, are fast approaching that?
Yeah, balance. I think it's more about harmony than balance. I think balance is really hard to strike, but if I focus on how is my community work in line and aligned with values that are core to me, and something that I'm super passionate about, in a way that those things give me energy while I'm doing them, then when I get home to focus on, my family and being a parent, I'm not drained, because I've been doing things that give me energy throughout the day. I think too, the benefit that I have being a native and never really leaving Nashville is that I have gotten to know a lot of folks, and built deep relationships for a long time, and can be a resource to folks who are moving here, who want to plug in and get involved. And it's so fantastic when I am approached with an opportunity and I can say, no, I don't have the capacity to do it, but I know someone who would be great. And making those connections is really meaningful to me, especially when someone has chosen Nashville to call home. I want to help them get involved and help make it the best place that it can be. So Rotary's been fantastic for that. I was honored to be the president, even though my presidency was right in the middle of COVID and I had to take the club from meeting in person to meeting virtual. I know the importance of that type of relationship building, and really have a lot of fun doing it.
Absolutely. No, thank you for that. One of the things that I've talked to a lot with guests, especially since late May and early June of 2020, is what has been called a racial reckoning, or racial justice issues over the last 2 years. It's been over 2 years since the murder of George Floyd. And I want to get a sense, from your vantage point, of how you see progress, if any, what needs to be done, and, and what have we learned?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. For me, my mom and both of my parents, but my mom in particular, we talk about these things a lot. She grew up in Nashville on Meharry Boulevard during the civil rights movement. So when Alexander Luby's house was bombed, the civil rights attorney, that was a couple of houses down from where my mom grew up, and she remembers being thrown out of her bed. And we talk about progress, like there has been progress made for sure. I don't know that, I would have the opportunities to do some of the things that I have done without the sacrifice and protesting and resistance that was shown from prior generations. But having said that, there's still a lot more to do. And, me and my peers are talking a lot about the movement from diversity and inclusion to equity, and really, are our centers of influence and power really creating new seats, or making space and sharing power with diverse voices. It's not enough to have representation in the workforce, but it's about leadership and bringing those voices forward, and being willing, not just to create programs, but to create opportunities for shared power. And I think, I've been encouraged by our leaders here in Nashville, building on the legacy of, what this city meant for the civil rights movement. This was an epicenter of sorts. I was there for the dedication of the John Lewis mural, and it is beautiful for sure, but it symbolizes what's possible when Nashvillians come together. And so I think it's an opportunity for us to lead, not just for this community, but as an example of other communities of what's possible.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
This has been a fundamental conversation that we have had and have been probing. And one of the things that I've also seen some progress. I've also seen some backlash. As that has come, but the conversation continues. Well, let's go back to your origin story about how did you go from native Nashvilleian growing up in Nashville to becoming the banker and the person that you are today?
Yeah. So I have taken advantage of opportunities as they've come. So I grew up in North Nashville. I went to Meigs Middle School and then Hume Fogg High School. And as a junior at Hume Fogg, there was an organization called Inroads, which identified talented minority youth and gave them opportunities for corporate internships. And I didn't know what I wanted to be, David, at 16 years old, but I was approached by Inroads with an opportunity to intern with SunTrust Bank, and I took it. I knew very little about banking. My mom was a public school teacher here in Nashville. My dad was a pastor, so I don't come from a family of bankers. But they gave me the opportunity to learn about business, and I interned every summer while I was at Belmont University, and then joined the bank full time after graduating. I enjoyed banking because it was kind of this blend of using my business degree, but also a way to give back and partner with the community, at least as a commercial banker. And my focus was nonprofits. So at SunTrust, all of my clients were nonprofit organizations. And a few years into it, I got the opportunity to leave banking, and I joined Big Brothers Big Sisters as the CFO there. So again, following impact. And that experience, 3 years at Big Brothers Big Sisters, I think we had 51 employees. We were serving kids in 10 counties. For the first time, I had the opportunity of learning how to operate an organization. Bankers are always advising their business owners as clients, but very few of them have had to actually operate an entity, make payroll, negotiate benefits. So I learned a ton, and after 3 years there, I saw an opportunity to bring that learning back to banking and serve folks with that additional perspective. And so that gave me, somewhat of an entrepreneurial itch, or at least being a part of operating and building something. And when I had the opportunity to work with Aaron Dorn and others to start Studio Bank, this was a perfect next step for me. And it's been a good one. We celebrated 4 years on the 14th of June, 83 or so employees now. It's been an incredible journey.
I want to thank you for sharing that. Congratulations to you on the anniversary. Again, for the audience, this is Harry Allen, the co-founder and chief relationship officer for Studio Bank in Nashville, Tennessee. We've come to the conclusion of the conversation. Before I let you go, Harry, I always like to ask guests that they leave some words of wisdom to help us get through this time.
Yeah, it's I guess if I could leave any words of wisdom, I think every challenge presents opportunities if we look hard enough. So there are some hard things that we're going through right now, which means that there are probably some significant lessons to be learned or opportunities to lean in. And so I would just say, if you're still here, kicking and breathing, figure out how to lean in and be a resource to those around you. And if I can be helpful in any way or connect you to a cause, it would be an honor for me. Nashville's gone through some tough times. This is another one, and we'll get through it together.
Thank you, Harry. May you stay well and healthy. And again, I'm so grateful for your time on the show.
Same here, David. Thank you.